Hello, hello. I'm Daniel, and still no Chelsea. And also no Matthew, and no. Well, I was also asked my other brother to join, but he's at off his Christmas party. So we're actually doing a solo show right now. It's just going to be yours truly. Granted, I still believe Chelsea is faking her sickness and just doesn't want to talk about the Colts this week. But we will know more about that when she gets back and we expose her. Um, Yeah, so it's gonna be a little something a little different, and it's also gonna be different instead of our normal Thursday show. We're gonna talk about two quarterbacks specifically that I find is you probably got an idea who the two quarterbacks are, but these are two quarterbacks that have been dominating the headlines probably the past 24 to 48 hours. We're gonna start with the grandpa himself, one Philip Rivers. It looks like he's on track to be the starting quarterback for the Colts this week. Which, I mean, you're about to face one of the best defenses in football in Seattle. And besides Seattle, then you have to face the 49ers, uh, end the year with the Texans, and Jacksonville in between that. So good luck with that. Yeah, everyone thinks this situation is doomed from the start. I'm being one of them. And I think we should look when we look at something like this, we should look at has this happened in the past before, where a guy comes back after retiring for about over a year, or even at this point over 5 years. Because when there's been plenty times in both NFL history and sports history that a guy's retired and he's come back, and and these people have played at different levels. Some have been pretty good, some have been fairly average, and some has been just been utter disasters. One that comes to mind in recent memory has been Marshawn Lynch when he retired from Seattle and then he decided to come back and play for the then Oakland Raiders for about 2 years. And he was nowhere close to being beast mode, but he was a fairly average, passable running back in the league. He wasn't it wasn't a disaster, is what I'm trying to say. Then you got guys like say like Deion Sanders back in the day. Sanders retired after 2000. He was out of the league for about 3, 4 years, and then he was convinced to join the Baltimore Ravens. I remember seeing Deion. I think he was a 37-year-old cornerback, which you really don't see anymore. And he played 2 years, about a year and a half for the Ravens. And again, he was basically a serviceable cornerback. He wasn't neon Deion. He wasn't prime time. He wasn't Showtime like he was throughout the 90s. He was fairly passable. Um, Honestly, the only time you can really think about this time, something like this going back and working, you have to go a long ways back to Bronco Nagurski. And yeah, that's the name that maybe you might not recognize. He was the Derrick Henry of his time. He was the running back for the Bears. He was out the league for about 6 years to go into wrestling. And then he returned to the Bears as both a running back and an offensive lineman. And they won the championship with him as one of his more important players. Um, there's a big issue with that though. It was 1943. So yeah, back the last time you could say it worked very well in the NFL. It was the last time the United States and Russia were actually allies. They weren't even Russia, they were the Soviet Union at this point. So that was the last time you can really think about in football perspective that this worked very well. There's been time it's worked okay, and there's about if it's been passable in NFL history. There's never really been a time that you said, this is perfect, this is amazing. And even then, Nagurski was okay. He was the Derrick Henry of his era. His prime was in the 1930s. Um, he was just fairly just a solid player. He wasn't when he came back, he was just a solid player. He wasn't the Bronco Nagurski of old. And I think just I don't even think that's probably the best example in terms of an NFL perspective. And the only time you can really think about it that a guy's missed this much time in between just like not playing. And at least in a team sport perspective. Because then you if because even though we're called launch college football, we obviously Chelsea and I both are big fans of the rest of the major sports too. Chelsea's even a big college fan as well. That's so I started thinking about times in baseball when this has happened. And baseball, I remember in Connecticut where I grew up in when Roger Clemens came back to the Yankees after retirement. It was a big deal. Clemens wasn't close to what he was in his second stint with New York. And honestly, like, well, part of that was because of PEDs, but part of that was just No, you get old. He was like 44, 45 at that point, and he just wasn't nowhere where he was. I remember Andy Pettitte retiring and coming back for New York, and he was a passable pitcher, but he wasn't the all-star Andy Pettitte that we knew throughout the 90s and 2000s. Um, yeah, I remember at least in perspective in terms of basketball, of you have the most obvious comparison would be to a Michael Jordan who retired after the 93 finals, played about a year and a half in baseball, came back to the Chicago Bulls, won 3 championships, 2 MVPs, all that jazz. I don't think that's really a perfect one-on-one comparison because Jordan, he was granted Phil Rivers, he's been a high school coach, so he hasn't just been sitting down. Jordan was still active in sports. He was still playing minor league baseball. He was still working out with like at basketball workouts with like you see videos of Scottie Pippen. He's dropping 50 plus on Scottie Pippen's Scottie Pippen charity basketball game at the old Chicago Stadium. Um, I guess in another perspective would be someone's contemporary of Jordan, Magic Johnson. When Magic Johnson was forced to retire after he got diagnosed with HIV, he came back about 3 years later, played about 40 games, and he was a good point guard. Again, he wasn't Magic Johnson of old. He wasn't the best point guard in the league. He was just a solid, passable, really good passable. Um, he was a solid point guard. I guess Jordan would be a better perspective of his with the Wizards than his second stint with the Bulls because his time with the Wizards, he was a good shooting guard. He was probably a borderline all-star to an all-star shooting guard. He just wasn't Michael Jordan because he was 40 at that point. Magic at that time in 95, I'm gonna say he was about 36, 37. Excuse me. So, and you go further back to even probably this is my perspective, and this is not my perspective, but this is the idea of what I'm saying a perfect comparison to Phil Rivers would be Bob Cousy. Just a little basketball history. You Bob Cousy was like the first showman point guard, the first guy with great handles, great passes. Anytime people talk about, oh, they was playing with plumbers back then, Cousy's still alive. He's still like, we weren't playing plumbers, we were playing Will Chamberlain and like Elgin Baylor and stuff. Cousy retired in 63, spent the next 6 years, he was he was just like he's not out of basketball, but like he was a coach, he was doing other stuff. He coached he was coaching Oscar Robinson actually. Oscar Robinson, the Hall of Fame amazing big point guard, the precursor to Magic Johnson and to more of the big point guards back in the day. And he decided at late, like around the age of 40, like I want to be a point guard again. And obviously it was a disaster. He played like 5, 6 minutes a game, couldn't do anything like he couldn't do anything he did in the past and just say, yeah, this is a terrible mistake. And I think the biggest thing from that perspective from Cousy in 63 to 69 compared to Phillip Rivers now, we can take a certain stuff from every athlete who's done this, every Hall of Fame level athlete who has done this. Because I think Phil Rivers, he was literally on the Hall of Fame ballot. He was going to be a Hall of Fame finalist. Whether he gets in or not this year, I think he's gets in eventually. So we can compare him to like say like a Bob Cousy, a Michael Jordan, a Magic Johnson in baseball, like a Roger Clemens. Pettit's borderline, but I don't think he's going to get in because he has PEDs to him. Andy Pettit in football, to a Deion Sanders, to I just mentioned did Deion Sanders to Marshawn Lynch, a beast mode. Um, so I think these are tobacco Nagurski. These are app comparisons, but I think the biggest thing is two things. Outside of Nagurski and Bob Cousy, these guys went out the league for this long. I guess Magic was, but Magic was still like only 3 years. These guys are out the league for a year and a half, comparatively speaking. Bill Rivers has been out the league since 2020. The pandemic year was his last year in football. He's been out the year for 5 years. As well, with the Jordan and the Magic comparison, they had retired relatively young. They retired in their early 30s. I think Jordan was literally 30 years old when he retired. And Magic was about 31, 32 years old. When he came back, when they both came back, they were both Jordan was about 32, 33, and Magic was like 36 at that point. So Rivers is 44, I believe. He is outside of like Tom, he's up there with Tom Brady and George Blanda back in the day as the oldest quarterbacks who's ever laced him up at this point in their career. That's a whole different perspective because when you think about how much the game has changed, and I've got this. So I was listening to Dominic Foxworthy, um, of when this news broke a few days ago. The NFL changes a lot from a year to a year in terms of defensive schematics, in terms of players coming in, players coming out, defensive scheme, offensive schemes, all that jazz. This is 5 years out for a player who, unlike Dion, unlike Jordan, unlike Magic, wasn't really like a super athlete. You're obviously a great athlete to play pro sports. You're not a super athlete. He wasn't a super athlete. He wasn't, this isn't like Mike Vick or Cam Newton, who I guess those guys retired because in part because of injuries. But this isn't a guy who, like, when he was playing, he was clearly dominating everyone in front of him. Even with the Bronco Nagurski comparison, Nagurski was about 6'2", 6'3", 240 pounds back in 1930. He might as well have been Godzilla out there. He was a freak of nature. That's not Philip Rivers. Rivers was always a fairly average athlete as a quarterback, solid arm, relied more on his wits and just his accuracy. So while we don't know, obviously we will know by this time Sunday because it looks like he's on track to be the starting quarterback against one of the best defenses in the league. He's on track to becoming the starting quarterback for that team. So this is going to be a special experiment because there was always a thing during the pandemic. All right, I remember this. The NBA season after the pandemic. I know we talk about different sports, but Chelsea ain't here, so she can't stop me. Um, the NBA season after the pandemic, when you had the new COVID regulations, and certain players at times had to miss a few games or miss like a week of games, or because they had violated protocol, or they contracted a virus, or in a lot of cases they just got injured because their bodies weren't used to working out to that degree, so they might get injured. And they pulled off players from retirement coming on like 10-day contracts. Players from the G League coming on 10-day contracts. Some were fairly okay, some was fairly decent. Um, I think the biggest difference in that is obviously both because basketball's a physical sport, but it's not the physical sport. It's not football. You're not worried about getting physically hurt from another man running into you. I don't know, like Phil Rivers wasn't a mobile quarterback. He wasn't a mobile quarterback at 24. He wasn't a mobile quarterback at 34. He ain't gonna look like Josh Allen at 44. That ain't gonna work. So Rivers is entering new territory in terms of being 5 years out of retirement, 5 years coming out of retirement. On the offense, that he doesn't have information. Like he was on the coach before, and he was fairly a good quarterback in his last year in Indianapolis. I know Chelsea wasn't the biggest fan of that era because it was the post Andrew Luck era. That I understand that, but like he was still a fairly solid quarterback for the Colts. But you're entering now into a situation where you are an older player. You're out the league for about half a decade. You're going against some of the toughest teams in the league who are now vying for a playoff spot. You're not facing the Raiders, unfortunately. You have a gauntlet at the end of the season. And the only other time you've seen this work is because back when the Soviet Union was a thing, and back when you had literally the greatest player of all time. And I know there's one more athlete that we're forgetting about. One more athlete that I'm forgetting about that I didn't mention before. Muhammad Ali. When Ali was suspended from boxing, came back 3.5 years later. Muhammad Ali was not the same boxer he was pre-suspension and post-suspension. If you look at Ali's fights in the 1960s, that was not the same Ali in the 1970s. He wasn't able to move around like he was before when he was younger. He wasn't able to dodge. That's a lot of people blame that reasons why he struggled so much with Parkinson's and like a lot of problems, health problems after his career. He was taking heavy punches and blows after he came back in the 70s and he boxed until like the early 80s. So, and he was successful. He was obviously successful. He won the heavyweight title twice. But it still caused a lot of damage because he had to change the style of what he was doing. Michael Jordan was the same way. It wasn't flying through the air anymore. It was this mechanical, scientific basketball game of jumpers, fadeaways, cuts and angles. The triangle offense did a great job of helping him allow him to do that. The Jordan in 1997 was not the Jordan in 1993. They were two different players. Same thing with Nagurski. Nagurski and not, I say that as I was watching, but Nagurski, and you can just look at the stats and look at like read articles and listen to people at that time. Nagurski in 1943 when he came back was not the same dominant, fierce runner he was 5, 6, 7 years prior, where he was just running through people. It was more of just like we need 2 or 3 yards, give it to Bronco. So I don't know how Rivers will be able to adjust to both adjust to the new passing, the new defensive schemes, all the new defense schemes, offensive scheme, all that, the speed of the game, where you have to get used to the speed of the game. There's reason preseason exists. Combined with that, with the only time this has ever worked has been with the greatest athletes of their respective sports. I like Philip Rivers. He's a great quarterback. He's not one of the greatest athletes of his respective sport. So time will tell us whether this works or not. We're going to figure out in the next, honestly, we're going to figure out by Sunday as well as throughout the rest of the season. I don't see him. He could potentially retire after this game if it doesn't work out. But yeah, this is unprecedented territory. And all I know is I'm not gonna say I'm worried about him. I'm worried about every football player who plays because football is a crazy sport. I'm more just, it's more of like an anomaly. It's more like I don't want to say circus act because I don't think he's doing this just for his showmanship. I think he loves the game. But maybe at sometimes, unfortunately, you have to give up what you love. But that's the pain of watching guys retire and get old. And that kind of leads us into the second topic I want to talk about, the second quarterback I want to talk about. That was Joe Burrow. Now, on this podcast, at least I think once or twice, I've gone on a long rant against the Cincinnati Bengals for both because their defense was terrible and kept them out of a lot of games. Because Bo once again spent a year mostly injured. Now this is the first he's talking in his recent press conference. He's talking about falling out of love in the game, like dealing with a lot of stuff, both on the field and off the field. We don't know the off field stuff. The only thing we know off the field that was a big deal with him was I remember a year or two ago he got his house robbed when he was playing a football game. I'm sure that was emotionally taxing. Talking about like I don't know, I love this game. I don't know all the stuff, and I just looked at that. I'm just um I I think I have to say this. I am a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. In basketball, I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan. In baseball, I am a Philadelphia Phillies fan. Those are my three main fandoms. I've watched every one of my teams both win a championship and lose a championship. But I always enjoy seeing greatness be great. And I'm always angry when incompetence is limiting greatness. And what do you mean by that? I'll tell you in 1 second. I remember we can talk about the just this past World Series. Seeing Shohei Ohtani, seeing the Dodgers win an all-time classic. It was enraging watching Shohei and Mike Trout, who's still in the Angels, being wasted on a team and organization that was incompetent. Because I like seeing greatness be great. I look at sports like Bill Russell had an amazing quote in one of his autobiographies that sports is nothing but a mixture of art and war. If it was all war, it would like if it was all war, there would be no beauty. If it was all art, it'll be hanging up to being it'll be a museum and there'll be no competition to it. So when I watch an incompetent organization and just mess up a great what someone I can tell and see already, this is an extremely talented, amazing individual but he can't do what he can't reach the levels that I know he can reach because of incompetence. It angers me in a way that I can only describe as if you're a music fan, if I'm a music fan. Um, I just imagine if like Jimi Hendrix is playing guitar and like one of his bandmates decided to walk up to him and just start detuning his instrument while he's playing. or like his manager comes off stage and starts, and you'll just look like, what are you doing? Just let greatness be great. Joe Burrow right now, and this is Joe Burrow right now is reaching a point with his quote. I'm getting a lot of, well, he was a Bengals quarterback, Carson Palmer in the mid late 2000s. I'm getting Matthew Stafford with the Lions. I'm getting Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders retiring prematurely with the Lions because they're just tired of the hustle. Joe Thomas with the Browns. I'm getting LeBron in his first stint in Cleveland. I don't like seeing great artists not being allowed to produce the art they can make. It's annoying. Even when it beats me. I hate the Bengals. They are my least favorite team. People are surprised when I say I like the Ravens more than I like the Bengals because I'm a child of the 2000s. I love defense. I cannot grow up in the 2000s and not watch the art that was on display of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and that insane Ravens defense and not enjoy watching that. Them and the Steelers are the same team. They are, or at least they were back when they had dominant defenses. They are linked together because I watch them and I see the same team in a different colored jersey. The Browns are just, I don't want to make this a Browns thing. Browns are just a trash franchise. I'm not sure they're ever going to be good, unfortunately, but sorry, Cleveland. The Bengals are something else, though. The Bengals have the ability to get talent around them, and they just, so for some reason, they mess it up. The best way I can describe it is this: they get talent around them, and they believe the talent in itself will lead them to victory, but not the ability to build around the talent. That works in no sports. And that certainly never worked in football. And the greatest example of that was Dan Marino. Dan Marino got drafted, he was falling in the draft. He was drafted in 83. He was falling. He was one of the last picks in the first round. He was kind of like the Lamar Jackson story. He was one of the last picks in the first round. He has one of the great rookie seasons for a quarterback of all time. He has one of the greatest seasons for, I would say personally, the 1984, Dan Marino's 1984 season was the greatest season for any quarterback in NFL history. Every other quarterback since then, the Mannings, the Bradys, the Breezes, they broke records from that year in a pass happy offense and era. Marino was doing this in the early 80s when people were able to knock your head off. But the thing about Marino, people who know football know. The reason he didn't win the championship was not because he wasn't talented. It was because the team did not build around Marino outside of their game plan was essentially Dan throw it all the time. Dan lead us to victory. That you can't win that way. No athlete has ever led their team to a championship, a team sport, by basically get on my back, I'm doing this myself. No athlete has, no athlete will. And what happened with Marino was he won a playoff game his rookie year and then lost in the second round, I believe. Lost the Super Bowl to the 49ers team, which was an actually well constructed, built around team, no weaknesses on any side of the ball. 85, another great season, lost in the AFC Championship game to the Patriots because the Patriots basically ran the ball all game. The Dolphins then had a defense that couldn't stop the Patriots' running game. Patriots had, I think, I don't quote me on this. They might have set the record for the most rushing yards in a playoff game because they just like look, we don't. They just say like we can't get Dan the ball, so we just gonna run on them all game. And I don't. And after that, it was over for me, because teams got better. Denver with John Elway, who was drafted first of all in the same draft as Marino. Watch that 30 for 30. Elway to Marino. That's one of the best 30 for 30s. Watch it. Just trust me on that. The Broncos started building a solid team around them, and Elway became the center point. The Broncos then were going to three Super Bowls throughout the decade. The Browns, I just trashed them earlier, now I'm complimenting them, built a really great team. They had a great backfield tandem of Kevin Mack and Emerson Booth, not Emerson Booth, Evans and Booth of the Jets. Ernest Binder and I believe Kevin Mack. And they had a great cornerback tandem as well. Bunny Coastal, I think, was a great quarterback they got from Miami and then the USFL. They ended up making deep. Those are probably the best Browns teams in recent memory. Um, and then by the time and that they basically controlled the most of the part of the rest of the 80s. And then by the time the 90s came, and that Dolphins team was still very much there and win the game for us. the Buffalo Bills came. And the Buffalo Bills constantly beat the mess out the Dolphins in playoffs. First of all, you have to go from Miami to Buffalo to play playoff games because Buffalo's winning the division, winning, getting number one seed. So you're already in the bad situation. But Buffalo is again a very well constructed, built team, and they just beat Marino constantly. And at that point, it was just over for Marino. By the time, by the late 90s, when Marino was well past his prime, Denver was finally winning championships with Elway because they had, again, Terrell Davis, Steve Atwater, Mike Shanahan. They had a well-constructed team around them that then just wasn't relying on just quarterback win the game for us. I watched the Bengals and you can tell this from their offseason moves. I like T. Higgins and I like Jamar Chase. You had one of the worst defenses in football, and you didn't solve that problem. You just basically you literally constructed the 1980s Dolphins. The Marino won games because he had the best receiving tandem of that era with the Marx brothers, Mark Duper and Mark Clayton. Those were the two guys. That's just T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. You built the same team of the Dolphins, and they didn't win. I think when I look at those comments, he's thinking about the fact that, man, the Patriots are on the rise now. The Patriots look like a really great team, and they're young and they're hungry, and they have a MVP caliber quarterback in his second year. You have a roster that I don't think that like doesn't really have any main weaknesses like in terms of I don't think they have like big time strengths, but they really don't have much weaknesses. I'm looking at the Broncos. The Broncos have this seasoned great championship head coach, this quarterback Bo Nix who looks like the net I'm not who looks pretty good, and this dominant defense. You have the Texans, and again another dominant defense with a quarterback and a coach that I fairly trust. I fairly trust D'Amico Ryan, and Stroud when he's healthy and is able to get protection looks like a pretty good quarterback. You look at Jacksonville, looks like they're building up to be a solid team. The Ravens, and you still you have the old guards. I know the Kansas City Chiefs are probably not going to make the playoffs, but they're still the Kansas City Chiefs. They're still Mahomes. I'm still trusting them to retool next year. I'm still trusting the Ravens with Lamar, even though Lamar seems like he's at a different point in his career, to retool and still be a good team. Pittsburgh's always going to be in the, even they're not contending, they're always going to be 9, 10 wins. Buffalo still has Josh Allen. I think Joe Burrow's looking around him and just saying, like, this team isn't constructing anyone around me to try to compete against. I can't even get out the AFC. You want me to go face whoever comes out of the NFC? I can't get out of this division. I'm behind this division right now. And now if Shador's anything good, then the Browns look like they're going to be having themselves a really tough time again, tough time in Cleveland. And like it's frustrating because again, I like seeing greatness being having talent around greatness. You and I'm seeing two scenarios right now for Joe Burrow, and they're both not good. Well, one's good. I'll say this: one is good, one is not good. The one's not good, unfortunately, is something me and Chelsea's talked about, and anyone in everyone in the NFL's talked about before is this might be the Andrew Luck situation. Well, it's just like I'm in too much pain, and that's insane to me. This was your first overall pick, and the Andrew Luck situation was insane to me back in the day. This is your franchise. This is your first overall pick. This is the guy that's supposed to be leading you for a dozen years plus. Why aren't you protecting him? Why aren't you giving him what he needs to win? I remember in the 2000s, the Colts draft Peyton Manning in '98. Bill Polian comes around the same time. Bill Polian built the Bills in the '90s. Bill Polian built a team designed for Peyton Manning's skill set. I'm gonna get great receivers around him, protect him at center, always have a solid running back. You got Edgerrin James. They had Marshall Faulk his first year, traded him, and then drafted Edgerrin James, who was that's a Hall of Fame running back. And then I'm going to construct my defense around pass rushers because Peyton's going to give us leads. The other team's going to have to throw the ball. I want guys that can hit the quarterback. That's why they got Dwight Freeney and that's why they got Robert Mathis. And then I'm going to get a defensive minded coach in Tony Dungy, who because I don't have to worry about the offense. Yeah, I have Peyton Manning. I can build him, the O coordinator can just construct the game plan, and I'm going to get myself a defensive minded coach that can do a good job and try to manage the defense. That's how you construct a team. That's how you build a championship team, and that's how you support your first overall pick, and that's how you support your quarterback. And then with the Andrew Luck situation, it was like Pale Bowling was gone. They just said, Andrew's going to win us games, and you know what? He did, and then what happened? When he went up against a really top team like the Patriots, they got stomped. I'm sorry, you can't. No matter how great a player is, when they go against a team, no great player will ever be a great team. There would A great player can beat a good team. A great player can beat a very good team. A great player cannot beat a great team. That's never going to happen, and that never will happen, period. So when you look at the Joe Burrow situation, you go the Andrew Luck route of just, I'm done. I'm retiring early. And I think the same way how the Colts franchise got set back to the point that they're just now signing Philip Rivers back off the practice squad. And then the whole Anthony Richardson situation, like the Colts had never recovered from Andrew Luck retiring. I remember we put up the poll, was a more painful retirement for a hot take Wednesday of Luke Kuechly and Andrew Luck. I don't even think that was close. The Panthers have good, like a great quarterback would never be better, would never, a great linebacker would never be more important than a great quarterback. That's just a fact, unfortunately. Like that's just the way the positions are. The great quarterback, like a good quarterback will always be more important than a great linebacker. So the Colts never recover from that. The Bengals won't be able to recover that if he retires. This would be just another Barry Sanders. This would be another this would be another Calvin Johnson. I'm just like, what are we? What are we as a franchise? Um, this would be even in the second scenario, which would help Burrow, but would still hurt Cincinnati, would be him pulling a Carson Palmer. Like Carson Palmer. One second. We need Chelsea here because my throat sometimes is scratching. Like yeah, Carson Palmer. I mean, Palmer was a great quarterback in the early mid 2000s. If he, I honestly think if he didn't wreck his knee on the first play of that playoff game against the Steelers, the Bengals probably would have been the favorite to win the Super Bowl that year. Palmer just got sick of it. Palmer just said, "This isn't a franchise that respects me, that's trying to protect me. I'm leaving. Like either trade me or I'm retiring." They traded him to Oakland. He had a few decent years in Oakland. Then he goes to Arizona, and he has an MVP calendar. He had a bunch of really great years in Arizona. That was probably the best receiver Fitzgerald had after one there. And they almost went to the Super Bowl in Arizona. They lost to the Panthers in a championship game. You look at that and look at even like a Stafford. Stafford, I think that Stafford's one of the most intriguing players to me. He was a good player, a solid, very good player in Detroit. He's a Hall of Famer. He's reaching his peak in with the Rams. And I think that's Joe Burrow in a nut. And I think in a lot of ways I compare Burrow to Andrew Luck in this way, but he's also a lot like Stafford because I don't think we've seen the best of Joe Burrow. We've seen Joe Burrow as a great player. We've seen Joe Burrow as a potential as MVP caliber. We saw Stafford like that in Detroit. Stafford had really great seasons. Stafford was great numbers in Detroit. He took them to the playoffs, I think twice. But we haven't. I think right now what we're seeing with Stafford this past few years with the Rams, even in his mid and late 30s, this is the best Stafford's looked because he has a competent organization, a competent coach, and a team built around his skill set. Joe Burrow will not get that unless wholesale changes happen. He's not going to get that in Cincinnati. So we're watching this great player, this great talent, this great star basically be it's like trying to get I keep going back to Jimi Hendrix, but guitar player. I keep going back like it's like giving Jimi Hendrix a bass guitar. Like, okay, this recordings of Jimi Hendrix playing bass. He can play bass. That's I know he can be a greater musician than that though. He's out of position. He's not in the right situation. Joe Burrow is not in the right situation in Cincinnati. If he goes to, of course, if you go to Sean McVay, McVay can make a ham sandwich, make me a half decent quarterback. But if he goes like to San Francisco, if he goes to say, I'm trying to think teams with solid teams with these needs quarterback. If he goes to Pittsburgh, honestly, Pittsburgh might be able to do something with him. Um, he goes to any team that's just not the Bengals, because unfortunately, because the Bengals have not shown in their history to be able to construct a well-built team for years and years and years on. Marvin Lewis was a really good coach. I think he got a lot of junk because like he wasn't able to win playoff games. Sometimes you just play a better team. Sometimes you have Andy Dalton, who just it might be one of the worst postseason quarterbacks I've ever seen, but he's still a good regular season quarterback, so they keep him around. Sometimes Vontae Burfict and Pac-Man Jones goes lose their mind against the Steelers and mess up your chance to make the playoff, the playoff in the wild card game. At least he constructed an organization that was competent year after year after year. Um, I don't see, and I Zach Taylor doesn't look like he's really that special of a coach. He's just there. Just basically, he has the ability not to drive. He's got the ability to drive his car, not driving the oncoming traffic. He can. Okay, good. Don't. You're not gonna be a NASCAR driver, okay? But you're not going to drive in traffic, but doesn't make you a NASCAR driver. Unfortunately. So I'm watching a great player on a bad franchise be limited, and it's frustrating. I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I remember watching him lose the Super Bowl to Aaron Rodgers, and while it was just painful, at the same time, I was like, wow, this guy's really good. That's crazy as it sounds. He's carving up my defense like it's a turkey, like a Thanksgiving turkey. It's amazing to watch him play quarterback. I watched them in the Super Bowl they won. I watched Larry Fitzgerald and Kurt Warner dice up Pittsburgh, one of the most dominant defenses I've ever seen, the 2008 Steelers. They got their butts handed to them in the second half by Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald. And it was amazing to watch. As a little kid, I was scared as I don't know what, but I was watching, it's like, I can't believe I've never seen a team be able to do this to this Steelers defense. I'm a Mavericks fan. I watched Doug dominate LeBron, Wade, and Marsh in the finals. Then I watched the 2014 24 Celtics, arguably one of the best teams I've ever seen, just kill Luka and Kyrie in the finals. I watch that team, like that team doesn't have any weaknesses. If this team sticks together, they obviously couldn't stick together because of salary cap reason. If this team was honestly one of the greatest teams I've seen in recent memory. I think that '04 team could probably, well, '03, '04 team could beat this current OKC team, and I'm not exaggerating. I like watching greatness. I liked watching the 2008 Phillies win the World Series. And then the next year they lost to the Yankees. And even though it was painful, I liked watching Alex Rodriguez break his postseason funk and play like Alex Rodriguez in the World Series. I'm not going to cheer against a great player being great, even if it hurts me, because I like seeing great players be great. Maybe in the moment I'm going to be annoyed. I won't lie. Last year's playoff game against the Ravens when Lamar and Derrick Henry were running up and down the field like it was a track meet. It wasn't the happiest I've ever been, but I wasn't like, I can't, oh, I hate Derrick Henry. I hate Lamar. Like, no, like, yeah, that's what great players do. If you don't guard against them, they're going to kill you. So, and there are times you've seen Joe Burrow do that, and it's painful to watch. Seeing him do that at times, knowing that either something's going to go wrong. Either the defense is not going to let the defense going to give up even more points they're going to lose, or they're going to get a coach, or the offensive line would be terrible and he's going to get hit behind and get sacked and stuff. That Super Bowl run was amazing when they went to the Super Bowl because I think he got like 8 sacks in the he entered that Super Bowl averaging like 7 sacks a game in that postseason. Burrow got the mess beat out of him during that postseason. He gets mess beat out of him ever since he entered this league. So when I see him saying, I'm out of love with the game, I'm having trouble loving this game, I'm just like, oh man, because I, it's hard to watch because I usually support the athletes in contract negotiations. I usually support the athlete and like because I know it's a tough sport and just get your money. This you're not going to be here forever. The owners are always going to be there because they can just sit on the butt and not get hit. And and honestly, when the player asks out for a trade, you have to take it on a case by case basis. Would anyone been that mad or annoyed if LeBron asked for a trade in 2007 or 2008? Would anyone been that mad? Was everyone, I guess people were mad when Kobe asked for a trade in '05, '06 because it was the whole after it was the Kobe and Shaq situation. But if LeBron asked for a trade, would anyone be that mad? Was anyone that mad when Miles Garrett asked for a trade during this past offseason? Like it was the Cleveland Browns. I looked at that and said, "Yeah, I get that. You want to be on a winning franchise. You want to play in postseasons. You don't want to just like waste your talent, your career. You're arguably one of the greatest players I've ever seen on defense. You don't want to just be there. You don't want your season to end before New Year's. Okay, you want to play in the highest spotlights. You want to play in the postseason. You watch Calvin Johnson retire after when he's 30, 31. You watch Barry Sanders retire. You watch you watch this and you're just like, I miss watching them play, and it's not their fault. It's terrible. It's I hate to watch it. I hate to watch it. And it's sad. It's one of those things that catch 22. If you're the worst team, you go get the best. You go get the best college player and the best play. And unless you get like a diamond in the rough, like a Tom Brady in the sixth round, the best players are probably will go start their careers with the worst team. And that's just like it's hard to watch sometimes because I want the best players on the best teams. And that sounds like, oh, you advocating for super teams. I'm advocating for a competent team. The Bengals are a competent team. Okay? I'm happy Shohei's now on the Angels because I want to see Shohei in the postseason. I'm upset Mike Trout signed a massive deal with the Angels. I'm happy making money, making money, but you're not going to do anything. But like I want to see you in the postseason. Basketball is a little different, I guess, because like the best player will typically make the postseason. Even if they don't go far, they go and make the postseason. Football, that's not like that. And baseball, that's not like that. So when I watch Joe Burrow, just like I'm like having trouble loving the game. I'm like, man, how could like we've seen this story before. We've seen Andrew Luck, we've seen Matthew Stafford, we've seen Calvin Johnson, we've seen Barry Sanders. We can even go all the way back in the day, and it was a different situation. But we've seen Jim Brown retire early just because he was fighting with young Art Modell. I don't like seeing organizations ruin great talent. The same way, I guess, in terms of music, you don't want to see some random studio executive come in like, I want to produce the song and do this. Like, no, leave him alone. Get the tools around him and let him be great. So it's a bit of a rant, but it's something I was thinking about when I heard that comment because all I'm thinking is I miss watching Andrew Luck play. Not as much as Chelsea, but I miss what I want. I when he was drafted, I said this is one, and after his first few years, I'm like, this is one of the one of the most talented quarterbacks I've seen in recent memory. I'm gonna like watching this guy play, and this is now gonna be like, oh, the AFC is gonna be interested in like in the late 2010s and early 2020s. Like the Colts are gonna be there, and then no, this team's gonna be there, and then the end of Patriots, and then what's gonna happen after that? And then Mahomes comes in. It's be Mahomes and Luck, and like and Luck's gone. I'm like, dang it. Like he's gone. It's over. That stings. But you can't take that beating for that long. It's a bonding game. You can't take do that for. You're not going to do that if you don't have to, and you're not going to do that if you feel like your organization is not going to support you. So, I guess in a nice note, it's relating back to Phil Rivers to see Rivers come back to the coast to show how much these guys actually love the game. Like he's 44. He has enough kids to fill out the entire football like side of the ball. Like he's was on the Hall of Fame ballot. He was probably going to be elected, if not this year, the next year or the year after. But he's like, I love this game and I want to go back and play it. Jordan, I love this game. I'm going back to play this game. Magic, I don't want to end my career just forced to retire because of disease that no one really knows that much about. If they tell me I'm healthy, I'm going back and playing. Um, Dion, I love this game. I know I'm great. I'm going back and playing this game. Going all the way just I guess Bronco was a different situation because that was the Bears were depleted because a lot of players were getting drafted to World War II. But it's still you still have to have a love of the game to go back to play the game. So to lose the love of the game like that it's hard to watch. It's painful to watch because it's watching a great artist like fall out of love with their art. It's the best way to say it. We are watching a great artist no longer enjoying playing piano, no longer enjoying writing a book. We are watching the death of, like, I guess, the death of an artist. Maybe the Bengals can turn around. Maybe they realize the error of their ways. I doubt it because this is the Bengals. This is not a competent organization. So that's left with one or two options. Does he become Andrew Luck or does he become Matthew Stafford? And I think me and the rest of the football world, the rest of the sports community and people on Launch Coach Football will say, I want to see Matthew Stafford. I don't want to see that Andrew Luck. So, yeah, this was a very interesting episode. Depending how this goes, maybe we'll do more solo episodes. I mean, even more episodes where we just talk about topics in the day or whatever. But I think it's very informative and also very just like, sometimes sports is more than just the X's and O's and fields and just who's playing who. Sometimes you get more into the artistic aspects of sports or the behind the scenes stuff or the psychological stuff. So no, it's a very interesting episode. I It's gonna be fun watching Philip Rivers play this week. It's gonna be fun watching Joe Burrow play this week. Um, hopefully, hopefully we get to see them play more. I'm Daniel. This has been Large Coast Football, and we'll see you hopefully with Chelsea next week.